Hello everyone, my name is Ipoa and welcome back to the How to Train Your Dragon tier ranking. This is part 5 of this series. We have covered title class mostly in the previous video, and today we will mostly be dealing with mystery class. Since we do have a lot of dragons to cover today, let's just get started right away. Moving on to the mystery class, we start off with a hideous Zippleback. The first multi-headed dragon we ever met. The hideous Zipplebacks are known for having one head breathe gas and the other head ignite the gas, creating fire. They can get confused sometimes, causing them to argue. The two heads argue between each other, and then the dragon sort of doesn't really get anything done. However, two heads can work together simultaneously, and they can solve problems faster than simply one head. Evolutionary speaking, this dragon is pretty good. I would put this into A tier. I believe that this is an A tier dragon because they simply aren't perfect, but they are very well coordinated and very well actually work together. Next we have the Snaptrapper. Now double the heads on the Zippleback and you get the Snaptrapper with 4 heads, split lower jaw, incredible hunting technique, and just a terrifying appearance. Snaptrappers lure their prey with scents that lure it together and lure it closer and closer, and the closer it comes, the higher the odds that the Snaptrapper will catch it. Since it has 4 heads, it has 4 possible mouths for catching prey, and it is a very playful dragon, as we know that it loves to play in the rain, similarly to the Raincutter. I would say this is again an A tier dragon, similarly to the Zippleback, because 4 heads, definitely they can get into a fight, they can argue, and they can confuse each other, causing the dragon to be unproductive. Alright, next we have the Change Ring. These dragons have been very well explored in the shows. They can completely change their coloration to blend in with the environment, making them virtually invisible. They shoot acid that can dissolve through wood, metal, basically anything, and they are incredibly territorial, aggressive, and also amazing hunters, as we see them easily catch night terrors when they were scattered without a leader. I would definitely say that this is an S tier dragon. Next up, the Bone Knapper. We don't see too much of this dragon, we have only seen him in the short, The Secret of the Bone Knapper, I believe it's called, and in that short we learned that the Bone Knapper is very determined. It's determined, and it also completely relies on finding bones of other dragons to hide its sensitive skin. So should it not be able to find enough bones, or should it grow so much that no bones fit him, or should he have a deformation, this dragon is basically screwed because he can't find the right bones. Also, it is sort of like a large puppy, as Gopper described him. He can be a bit too playful sometimes, and they're just very weird dragons to me. I don't think they will go extinct, but I think that they're not really the best designed. I would say B tier for this dragon. Next up we have the Smothering Smoke Breath. Smothering Smoke Breaths are pack dragons, however on their own they are not as vulnerable. They do not rely on their pack for protection or for safety in numbers. They mostly just rely on their pack because that's the easiest way to gain more metal, and that's the faster way to build a secure nest. And on its own, a Smothering Smoke Breath may not be able to raise a nest, however it will most certainly be able to fend for itself and hunt and fight. And simply because of that reason, I think that this is an A tier dragon. Again, the fact that it can't nest on its own is a bit of a problem, but yeah, I would say this is a pretty solid A tier dragon. Next up we have the Flightmare. Now the Flightmare is one of the coolest dragons in my opinion because it can literally freeze or paralyze its opponents, to be precise, and it still has such a cool design, all the little tendrils on the wings and on the head and the glow. It's so nice. However, the Flightmare has the same problem as the Rhapsodon and the Crayfin. It's that it only feeds on one thing and it is limited to that food source. Now, unlike those two dragons, should its food source move, the Flightmare moves with it, and it's not a problem for it because it can travel long distances and for a long time simply to stay with the algae that flows through the water. And since the algae flows through the water on its own either way, would the Flightmare want it or not, it kinda has to move all the time. It's still a bit limited by that, and if it's too busy eating, then it won't even notice it being captured. That is why I would say it's a B tier. Next, Sweet Death. Sweet Death is another mystery class dragon that quite literally got its name because it smells very nicely, I believe. It has a very good scent and it kills rather ruthlessly. It spends most of its time underground, it doesn't really like daylight, and it just looks like a huge worm that grew legs and wings. I do not think that this dragon has any major weaknesses. The fact that it has to spend most of its time underground probably means that it has poor eyesight, so that is not the best. And since I don't think it has echolocation to kind of guide it at night or at any time of day, I would say this is something of a B tier or A tier. I think it's a B tier. No, sorry, not B tier. A tier. I think this is a good A tier dragon. Next, this is the Moldruffle. Moldruffle is a Stoker class dragon that isn't really too special in any way. It does have a pretty nice design with the horns, and the tail has a very flat out fin, similarly to the Shovel Helm. As a Stoker class dragon, it does pose a bit more of a threat than a Shovel Helm. It can attack, it can fend for itself, it is not pack reliant. I would say this is maybe even an S tier, as it doesn't again have any major weaknesses. Either S or A. I think it's A more. It's higher than A, but it's lower than an S. The next dragon is the Sword Stealer. Sword Stealer has a magnetic skin, which makes everything metallic around it literally glue to its skin. I mean, not glue, but attract and stick onto its skin, which is great for creating armor when you are vulnerable, and great for fighting because the more metal you have on yourself, the more will you be protected. These dragons don't really have too much weaknesses. The only weakness they could have is if they aren't covered enough, then their weak skin is exposed and they can easily be taken down. However, most of these dragons do spend a lot of their life covering their skin and finding as much metal as possible to protect themselves. Honestly, I am not really sure where I would put this dragon. I think this is sort of a tier again. Not perfect, but it's pretty good. Next, Silk Spanner. Silk Spanner did not appear in any of the series or movies, however they are depicted in the graphic novels and later made their way to Rise of Berk. These dragons do not have wings, however they do have 6 legs and are sort of a mix between a spider and a lizard, you could say. That's the closest hybrid I would say that you would get. They can't fly, of course, because they don't have wings, but they are able to weave webbing between their legs and glide for short distances. This gives them the ability to travel if needed, however, they don't always need to travel. They are perfectly capable of simply finding a nest and settling there. They are territorial, they have a lot of really cool abilities, such as, for example, babies can suck out poison and toxins out of other dragons and humans, which is a really cool and quite literally a life-saving ability. I would say that this dragon is a solid A tier. Again, they can't fly, which sometimes would make them vulnerable if they can't escape or if they don't have a high point to glide off of, but they are still a pretty good design from the evolutionary standpoint. Next, we have the Death Song. This dragon is an apex predator. It is very large. It has a hypnotic song ability which causes all dragons that hear it, besides the thunder drum, but because it can't hear it, to be drawn to the song. Then it uses hot ember, which hardens when cools down, to capture dragons and keep them around its lair until it gets hungry enough to eat them. In nature, without humans, this dragon would not have any problems at all. It would have a constant food source because it could easily lure in dragons, and without a doubt that's an S tier. But next to the Death Song we have the Slither Song. Slither Song is sort of a cousin or a relative to the Death Song. It is simpler in appearance. It has smaller wings, slightly different head, and the markings on the wings are far simpler. However, the general appearance is pretty much the same. It has the same abilities, singing or humming a melody which hypnotizes dragons close enough to capture them, also in hot ember that hardens once it cools down. Since its hunting ability is the same as the one of the Death Song, and it doesn't have any virtual weaknesses, this is also an S tier dragon, without a doubt. Then we have the Armor Wing. Armor Wing is again a mystery class dragon that also, similarly to the Sword Stealer and the Bone Knapper, has very sensitive skin. And unlike the Sword Stealer, who has magnetic skin to cover itself, the Armor Wing has to gather metal and then fuse it together, or basically mold it together onto its skin to create an armor. Now, this dragon, it does have a very bright, almost white fire that creates a blinding effect, or like it impairs the vision of whoever is hit for several minutes. However, this dragon is not impervious to all attacks. Should its skin be exposed, it is very vulnerable, and even the slightest attacks can badly damage it. We see that smoke breaths, should they see the Armor Wing, they will literally tear all metal off its skin and leave it completely exposed, which for a wild dragon, where metal is not always easy to come by, it's not always a good situation. That is why I would say that this is again a B tier dragon, similar to the Bone Knapper. If it's in its element, then it's pretty much safe. However, as soon as the metal starts coming off, they're in great danger of injuries and death. Then we have the Buffalord. Buffalords are a very passive dragon species. They are completely docile. They literally do not mind anything that's happening to them as long as they are close to their food source. This again puts them into the same category as the Europtodon and the Crayfin, because they can only live normally as long as they're close to their food. They aren't reliant on their food. They do eat other things besides the special herbs, but they refuse to leave those herbs out of their diet. They want them and kind of need them in their diet, and that is why they are limited to very exclusive areas, and that is why they were easily tracked down, hunted, and killed. So that is why they are very close to extinction, and I'm putting them into the C tier. Should there not be human hunters, only dragons and other animals in the world, they would most likely do just fine, because nothing would be really crazy enough to go and attack them besides some very large predators. But they would mostly do fine, but still, limiting yourself to only one food source is not always the best idea. Following the Buffalord, we have the Cavern Crusher. This is a very predatory, scavenging, mystery class dragon with no wings. Again, this is already the third dragon with no wings we had today. This dragon usually attacks nests of other dragons and feeds on eggs and babies, making it a scavenger and a pretty resourceful dragon. It can produce extremely flammable mucus. This mucus is basically produced out of the body, similarly to the monstrous nightmare gel. However, this mucus is much more flammable, and the dragon can actually cover its opponents in it, and then should the opponent try to breathe fire or light something on fire, then most likely they will get hurt and not the Cavern Crusher. This is a very smart tactic. The only instance in which the Cavern Crusher can be vulnerable is if all the mucus is burnt or evaporated off of it. and this is very rare as it would need a combined firepower of a monstrous nightmare and a fireborn queen to create something hot enough for the mucus to evaporate. That is why I think this dragon is S tier again, because it is just very adaptable. It can easily move through rocks, caverns, it finds food where it can and it runs off, and it just lives a pretty good life. As a predator, it made itself a very good life by just feeding where it can. Next is the Sandbuster. Sandbuster is in concept very similar to the Sand Wraith. It buries itself in sand and uses an ambush tactic to attack its victims. This dragon literally shoots out hot burning sand, which when it hardens turns to glass, which is something that no other dragon can do. It is also known as a hoarder, as it collects items and usually uses those items to build a nest. It has no problem eating Vikings, humans, and basically anything that comes close enough to its lair. However, this dragon is very sensitive to light, something the Sand Wraith is not, and that is why it has to spend almost all of its time underground, and it has to rely on being completely sheltered from the light. That is why I think this dragon is B tier. Not even A tier, B tier, because being completely limited from light is not always easy, and even the smallest crack in the ceiling, even if only one of the glassy roofs or the patches in the ceiling collapse, it has a lot of work to do, and it is just simply put in a very vulnerable position. However, still a very good tactic, a very cool way of hunting, and a very cool dragon design in general. And with that, we have come to the end of today's video. I know that Mystery Class is not finished quite yet, however there are so many dragons in it that it would be really hard to cover them all just in one video, especially under 20 minutes. I want to thank you all so much for watching. I really hope you enjoyed it, and if you did, feel free to let me know by liking this video and subscribing to my channel, because it really helps me out, and that's how you can support both me and the channel, and it really means a lot. So thank you all so much for watching, and I hope I'll see you next time. So long!